welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. Hello and a very warm welcome to the latest episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. Today's guest is Jonny Wiseman, Customer Experience Director at West Midlands Trains, who is going to share his career story and his hopes and aspirations for the rail industry as we move forward into the future. Jonny Wiseman, Customer Experience Director for West Midlands Trains. It is an absolute joy to welcome you to the virtual couch for the Intuitive Insights podcast. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see you. I always enjoy our conversations. So the fact that we're able to share this conversation with our podcast audience is really making me happy, because I generally get lots of inspiration from our conversation. So not that I'm putting a huge amount of pressure on you to be inspirational, obviously, for the next half hour or so. But Jonny, we're going to start with in the traditional format for the Intuitive Insights podcast. And I'm going to ask you to share your story, your career story that takes us back right to the beginning, that says, what have you done? Where have you done it? And why have you done it? And as we go through, I'm sure there'll be areas that we can focus on in terms of the really good stuff, the inspiring stuff, the interesting stuff. So I'm going to hand over to you. It's all about you. Tell us your story.
Thank you. Well, for me, the railway has been one of life's very happy accidents. I finished university not knowing what I particularly wanted to do, and I agreed to go on a grad scheme, but took a year out before I did it. And I did a series of temping jobs, including being a builder in Leeds, which I genuinely loved, was awesome. But when the building site closed down in the winter, I needed a bit more money so I could go travelling before going and doing what I deemed to be the proper job I'd signed up for. And I went to a recruitment agency in York, and they said they had a role going at a train company. It sounded really dull, and they told me it paid something like £11.50 an hour. And I signed up on the spot, 3 shifts. It was just doing general admin work for a new train company that was starting on the 4th of February 2004, possibly the 1st of February. It's a long time ago. And that was Trans-Pennine Express. And I went in not knowing anything about the railway. I didn't know anyone who worked for a railway company or companies that work alongside the railway. And I just found it an awesome place from day one. There was a bit of chaos. It was a startup of a new franchise, lots of people scrabbling around looking for answers. And within that chaos, that really vibrant environment, I made myself useful, and I started to talk to people, and I got a real buzz, and it was somewhere that I realised I wanted to work. And after a couple of months, they advertised for some duty operation managers roles at York, where I lived. And I applied, and they took a bit of a punt on me, not having a railway background. And I loved it, and I've been hooked ever since. And one of the things we might touch on later is I want to tell more people about the railway, because I hadn't considered it as a career option up until that point. All the way through school and university, no one had said, here's the railway. And I had no knowledge of the vast array of jobs you can do, either working for train companies, network rail, freight companies, the supply chain. It's almost endless. So I spent 6 and a bit years at Trans-Pennine Express as a duty operation manager, so looking after train crew, arranging shunt moves, looking after customers, fighting Trans-Pennine's corner at York Station, which was run by GNR at the time. We were a little operator, they were a big operator, it was their station. So just getting our elbows out and making sure that we were heard so that our customers were looked after, our staff were looked after. And that progressed. I ended up leading the team of DOMs, went into some contract management there, and absolutely loved my experience. I've still got friends who work there to this day who will be lifelong friends. Then I got an opportunity to join East Midlands Trains as a route manager, looking after the north end of their network, stations, stakeholders. And that was another company where there were hugely inspirational people to work alongside, lots of opportunities to continue learning. quite inquisitive. I want to know how things work. I want to know how to make things better. I like to have a purpose, a mission. So there was always something to do. And again, stayed there for just over 6 years, managed stations, managed train crew, did some contractual stuff, spent some time on the stagecoach bid team whilst I was there, which was a completely different area than any I'd worked in previously. Didn't really know it existed. And if things carry on the way they are with the rail industry, they might not exist again. Mm-hmm. But, more experiences, met more people who, again, I've stayed in touch with. You realise the railway is one big family, and there's lots of people who have worked together in the past or know people who've worked with people you're working with. And then moved on. I had no particular career path in mind. My rationale for accepting any job is I need to be interested in it. I need to know that I'm going to be able to make a difference. And I want to know that the culture and the environment are one where you can flourish, where you can take chances, you can try and make things better. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. So that's kind of been the thing that's guided me every step of the way. Virgin Trains East Coast, again, which was GNR from when I first started. Yeah. Lots of challenges for that franchise that have been much reported, but again, some amazing professionals who work there to this day, who did their best to operate a really good service in challenging circumstances, delivering some change. And then I came and joined West Midlands Trains in the late summer of 2018 as the head of stations for the London Northwestern part of the business, which operates mainly on the West Coast Main Line, and was absolutely happy to be a head of department, looking after stations, interacting with stakeholders, looking at projects. And then an opportunity came up to apply to be a customer experience director. And it was more of a speculative application, really. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a director. I had no massive aspiration to take the next step on the career ladder, but I thought it was a role that I could probably do some good in. It was interesting, understood what West Midlands Trains was trying to do as a whole. And I went through a long interview process, some grueling interviews. And I got the job, and I've absolutely loved it ever since. The role has evolved and changed every year. It started out just looking after London Northwestern. It's grown now to look after West Midlands Railway as well. So all of West Midlands Trains. It now encompasses the stations, the senior conductors, our guards, the property team who look after the maintenance of our estate, look after building projects and contracts, customer experience strategy team, including our customer relations team, external comms and stakeholder engagement, part of the business that I absolutely love, because telling people about what we do, telling about when it goes wrong and why, what we're trying to achieve, is so important to our mission. And also includes the revenue protection team. I'm just going to quickly count, because if I've forgotten anyone, they'll be cross with me.
That's quite a list. So to be fair, you would be forgiven for forgetting someone, I think, because that is quite a list of areas of responsibility. Yeah,
and I think I spoke to Ian, the managing director, about this last week. I think if I'd been given all of that from the get-go, I would have drowned. It would sink, but it's grown organically over time. And the whole of West Midlands Trains has just been a constantly improving business that I've been hugely proud to be part of, particularly in the senior leadership team. Some of the things that the directors, the heads of department have put in place, and the honesty that we've got and humility to keep driving forward is just a really cool thing to be part of. But it's kept me interested, because every year the role has changed, and I expect it to continue to change. It's the nature of things within the railway. So that's a bit of a potted history. There wasn't a plan. There isn't a plan going forward, but that guiding mantra about I need to be able to make a difference in what I'm doing, and I've got to be interested in it, I think, are the two things that will guide me for the rest of my career.
Yeah.
So I don't know what will come next, but I'm very, very happy here. I've been happy in every company I've worked in. I feel very, very, very lucky. I've never worked for Network Rail. I've never worked on the freight side, but spent a lot of time interacting with colleagues in those parts of the industry. And perhaps the future will give opportunities to delve into those areas.
Thank you for that. I think you've given us some clues as to the next question that I'm about to ask you, but I still want to ask you anyway, just to see what your response is. when you started describing your career story, you said that someone took a punt on you. Why did they? Why do you think they took a punt on you? And what would somebody in your team now, or in the organisation that you work in, what would make you take a punt on them?
It's a really difficult question, because you're asking me to look back at myself from nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as they see me in and around the train crew depot at York, and rather than sitting there texting on a phone or reading a magazine, because phones weren't as up to date as they are now.
I don't think we could text then, could we? I'm not sure.
I just tried to make myself useful. There were problems that people needed help. People needed to find job cards. They needed kit. Things needed posting in the signing on point. Mm. And there were people who started with me who probably did just cruise and take the money, but that's not really within my nature. No. I like to do things. I like to make a difference. It doesn't matter whether that's to one individual or a group of individuals. And I was inquisitive. I wanted to know. And people who are proud to work for a company or for an industry, and railway people are proud people. They're practical people. They're fun people to be around. Okay. I think they probably responded to that. And maybe I was a little bit different. You know, I'd come completely from left field. So probably lots of people applying for the jobs had worked in rail for a while, or maybe had done jobs that were more suited to the roles I was applying for. But yeah, I was very happy they took a punt on me, and hopefully they were happy. And I still see some of the people who did those first interviews for me. Yeah. This day, or maybe not for the last year or so, but they're still around, they're still working, and it is really nice to see them.
Yeah. It's nice, isn't it, when you look back over your career and you know, and without exception, whoever I speak to, there's always somebody that you can pinpoint that says, they took a punt, they gave me a chance, they saw something in me, which quite often, and it is a difficult question, because quite often we don't even see it in ourselves because we're just doing what we do. So, you know, that inquisitiveness, that willing to get stuck in, roll your sleeves up, get on with it, not ever having that, well, that's not my job, so I'll not bother doing that, but being able to turn your hand to anything.
And I think, so there's lots of things I'm very bad at. Maybe one thing that I'm quite good at is understanding you can't boil an ocean. You can't tackle everything in its entirety. Just break it into small chunks and do something. And that's helping the wider system or the wider thing that you're trying to achieve as part of a team or an organisation. And your second part of your question, what would I look for in someone to take a punt on now who'd maybe come from left field? And I think the best teams are diverse teams in every sense of the word, different backgrounds, different career paths, come from different places, want different things, because it makes you greater than the sum of your parts. The thing I always look for is attitude, behaviours and experiences. So when you read a lot more CVs than I do, but when I read CVs and I see lists of qualifications, that's all really cool. I want to see what people have done. And when I interview them, I want to know what they're interested in, what do they like doing outside of work, because it gives you a little snapshot into what they're like as a person or what they might be like to work with.
Yeah.
But I look for people who are driven, who want to make a difference, who you know are going to come with the right attitude, be inquisitive, use the right behaviours in the workplace, challenge appropriately, not be afraid to take feedback, because we all fail every single day, and actually the feedback helps us get better. So they're the kind of things I would look for on taking a punt on people. And I think that's one of Westman's train success over the last few years, is that as we've promoted people, as we've recruited, there is a really nice mix of people who've come from within, maybe only ever worked for Westman's Trains or worked within the wider rail industry, but also a lot of people who've come from different kinds of industries, different sectors, and they bring something different and they challenge us. You know, they challenge me. They ask questions that make you think, I'm not sure why we do it like that.
Exactly.
And that's important.
Yeah. It's really important that having that different perspective, because it is very, very easy. And I know, because I do it myself, you know, you do what you do because it's what you've always done. And then for somebody to say, why are you doing it like that? And I don't know. I've just always done it like that. Well, how about, because the world's moved on, there's technology we can use, there's different ways of doing things, and we haven't got the monopoly on all the good ideas, have we? So let someone else have a go.
It's a constant evolution, and one of the things I always try to do is to check myself. If you come across something, decision that someone may have made 10 years ago, is try not to criticize them for it, because you weren't there at the time, you weren't walking in their shoes, you don't know what pressures they were under, you don't know what the operational challenges were. All you can control is how you make decisions and drive your business forward from this point on. And there's people who've probably followed me into roles and go, I can't believe he did that, or he made these decisions. But that's just the way it is. We've got an awful lot of challenges in the rail industry. We've got really good people who can help us overcome those challenges. But if we spend too much time dwelling on the past, it's going to hold us back in the future. Yeah,
agreed. We are going to move on to kind of think about the challenges in a bit more detail, but I cannot let you skate past life as a customer experience director at West Midlands Trains without mentioning the big event that happened last year and that was hugely successful. So you had a big part to play in the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Everything I've read, Jonny, everything I've heard, and I'm sure there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about and we don't need to know, but on the face of it, that looked like an incredibly successful programme of work that you delivered at West Mids. You must be hugely proud of that.
Yeah, and just pride is the one sense I get from that, not just for West Midlands Trains, for the whole region. And if you think about the context of where West Midlands Trains have been in the recent past, with not having enough train crew, which is a problem that lots of train companies have run into post-COVID, post the COVID issues, the West Midlands was behind on building lots of the infrastructure we needed. Businesses were struggling to recover. It was a real shot in the arm for the whole country, I think, but particularly for the West Midlands.
Yeah.
People just see the 2 weeks of the live events, but because we've spoken about it a number of times, the planning for that started years and years ago, and we made some really difficult decisions that would enable us to have the maximum train crew available, the maximum fleet availability. It was a huge organisation. The Grand Rail collaboration, which brings together the train companies and Network Rail and DFT and other entities, played a huge part in coordinating that. But it was just epic. There's no other word for it.
Yeah.
The hard work was done before. It was hard work during it, but it was seriously good fun. Things went wrong, but we coped with it. We dealt with it. We found workarounds, and other organisations had challenges and they worked around it. And collectively, we put on a really good show. People were happy. People came to the games and had smiles on their faces. Yeah. It has left an important, lasting legacy. It's given people self-confidence to know that they can rise to challenges. I don't often get particularly nervous. I'm not particularly someone who likes to be in the limelight. But nerves, I think, are a wasted energy. But the day before, I was genuinely quite nervous. And then,
some adrenaline was pumping.
Yeah. And then the day of, you're putting everything, you've tested everything, but not with the numbers of people. And when we did that opening ceremony, that was really cool. I took my eldest daughter with me. She put on her orange vest and she came and helped.
Right.
We went to every bar and we saw everyone going in. We saw everyone coming back. The queuing systems worked. The management volunteers, the staff who were working, the police officers, the volunteers that were part of the games network, it all worked really, really well. And I will be proud of that forever, evermore.
Yeah, as you should be. Amazing achievement. And as you say, yes, the planning in the lead up to it, really key. Delivering the event itself, obviously, I would imagine not just a career highlight, but a life highlight, but the legacy of that afterwards, knowing that so much change has been there for so many people being part of that. And in an industry where we tend to be on a bit of a roller coaster, don't we, in relation to the good times and the not so good times. So to have that sense of elation and pride, massive pride around delivering something so successfully and so collaboratively as well, because I think this is a behaviour which we're seeing more and more of in the industry, certainly from my perspective, people working really effectively together and not in the silos which might have gone on in the past. So massive congratulations to you and the whole team for delivering that. Incredible. Very, very proud on your behalf.
And one of the important footnotes is everyone was tired after the Commonwealth Games wherever you looked, and lots of people had a bit of a come down because it's quite exhilarating. There's something going on every day. And it was 4 weeks, I think almost to the day after the Commonwealth Games finished, that the Queen passed away. And then Operation London Bridge had to be put into action. And that probably caused me more concern because you had people who hadn't taken holiday during the Commonwealth Games taking holiday, and a completely different tone of event. But again, that was another example of the industry coming together, working really well. The word collaboration that you used, lots of people think that means having lots of warm, fuzzy meetings and patting each other on the back. Actually, collaboration is challenging each other, and lots of meetings for the Commonwealth Games and for London Bridge were very difficult behind the scenes. But the result of being able to have such good quality relationships where you can challenge each other internally and with other organisations means that what we end up delivering is the best it can be. And we've really tested ourselves. So I think the word collaboration has been on its own little journey over the last couple of years. And
I agree.
I think we're probably in a good place with it now.
Yeah, I completely agree. So this is the part of our conversation where I do the fairy godmother bit, and I say, I'm going to grant you 3 wishes, Jonny. And I'm going to say to you, knowing the industry as you do, having worked in it for a really decent chunk of time, being as passionate about it as I know you are, and I share that passion. If you could change 3 things, if I gave you 3 wishes, what would they be?
Okay, so first one is I would wave my magic wand and I would see a clear vision for the industry going forward. There's obviously lots of people who would probably say, well, we've got one and it's GBR, and they'd be quite right on one level. But I think it means different things to different people, and there's still some uncertainty around what that's going to look like. Very complicated industry with lots of different participants who probably all want something a little bit different. Rather than try to move everything at the same time, which would, in my opinion, be trying to boil the ocean, if we had a really clear vision, clear purpose of where we're trying to get to, everyone can move independently to that point. That my little simplistic head is chunking things up and getting there. And I don't think we've had that really clear vision yet. I think there's lots of people trying, and I think we're moving in the right direction. But I think until we do, and everyone is bought into that one single vision for the industry, I think we're going to continue to have uncertainty and things being tinkered with. And I think I said it earlier, railway people, whichever bit of the industry they work in my experience when I've met them, are practical people. They want to make things happen. They want to fix things, want to make things better. That would free people up just to get on, and whichever bit they look after, to do the best they can do with it, knowing where they were ultimately going to end up. And it needs political buy-in. It needs buy-in from the entire rail industry. But that, I think, would help massively. That'd be one. My second one is I would like to remove some of the uncertainty. 2 things that worry human beings is uncertainty and change. And at the moment, we've got uncertainty about change. And that isn't healthy. Change is a natural thing. The railway has changed and evolved throughout its entire existence. In my 19 and a half years, it's changed hugely. So change isn't something we should necessarily fear, but it's something I would like to take away, because I know it worries people. There'll be people coming into work today worried about what their job's going to look like in the future. As far as I'm concerned, the railway is a people business, and it's always going to need people in it. We need experts. We need people who understand how it works to support customers, to look after colleagues. So I would wave the magic wand and I would remove the uncertainty and just get us to a happier place. And then my third one is a little bit left field, but probably not for you actually, because I may have said this before, but I would like to tell more people about the railway. I would like to tell people about how good the railway is. I'd like to tell people about the challenges that I've got. We quite often focus on the negative, and actually we do so much good, whether that's moving people around the network day in, day out. It's not newsworthy. We like to focus when it goes wrong, or a train company's having a problem, or the railway's broken. But actually, most people travel by train and they enjoy it. and it's a good experience. We do immense work with stakeholders, with community groups, with schools, with other people. We're not very good at shouting about it. I'm not very good at shouting about it. So it's not a criticism of the industry, and I think I'm better at it. I need to be better at it. But most importantly, I want to tell people the railway is an industry where they can come and work. You know, I said at the beginning, for me, it's a happy accident. I hadn't considered it. So now you think about how many hundreds of thousands or millions of people have slipped through the net because they didn't know that there was a job here for them, or that it's an industry that is open for everybody, for whatever your skill set, wherever you come from, whatever you want to do. This is an industry you should look at. We need the brightest, we need the best, we need talent from right the way across the country, every community. And I think if we get better at telling people about the industry, that will help us in the future. We need to be sustainable. And I don't necessarily mean big, glossy advertising campaigns. I'm talking about people going out and talking to people, telling people what they do for a living. So yeah, they'd be my three things. They're
great. I love them. I'd like to expand on them a little bit. I'm going to start with number 3 because that's something that I'm massively passionate about, is the people side. And I think that we are quite possibly the best kept secret in terms of the opportunity to work and to do different things. So if I think about a couple of years ago when my daughter was still in college and her friendship group, they were looking for work experience, and I'd be saying to them, what about the rail industry? Well, I don't want to drive a train. Well, first of all, maybe not, because that wouldn't be for everybody, but for some people that is a flipping amazing job. But actually, there's so much more to the rail industry than driving a train. And what I think people don't realise is that if you leave school, you're considering your career and you want to go into marketing, you want to go into law, you want to go into product development, you want to go into retail, you want any function that any career that you were thinking of focusing on, you can do in the rail industry. And I just don't think that people realise that, because we don't tell them often enough. So I'm completely and utterly with you on that. And we're Intuitive are doing our bit. We're banging the drum constantly. 40% of the people that we've put into new roles over the last 10 years have come from outside of rail. So they've come from other sectors, and we've sold them the dream to come and work in rail and be part of making that difference. But gosh, there's so much more to do. And scary statistic released the other week by at the Women in Rail conference. They put a slide up. I wasn't at the conference, I saw the slide. Less than 3% of the 250,000 people that work in the industry are age 25 and younger. So there's a lot said about the ageing workforce and the fact that we've got lots and lots of people in absolutely business critical roles who are coming up to, or actually already are, eligible for retirement. But what about the other end? We're not filling the funnel in. Less than 3% of the workforce. So we've got a lot of work to do. So I'm glad you've chosen that for one of your 3 wishes, because it's critical.
It might happen in other industries, but I've not come across it yet. But this is a sector where if you show that you've got the right attitude, you display the right behaviours, you try hard, you can get promoted. If people, there's a career ladder that people can progress through. But more importantly for me, and it's something I've taken advantage of, I've done different things. I haven't been pigeonholed to say this is just the activity that you do. If you've got a base set of skills and you're prepared to learn, you're given opportunities. That's for me has been the best part of my career, as I've been exposed to commercial stuff, to customer service stuff, to operations stuff I've probably not even really registered. And I think in lots of sectors, you get put into a swim lane and you're expected to stay in that swim lane.
Yes.
And, it might be the case in other industries. I just don't see them closely enough. I think it is something that we should really shout about.
Yeah, I think we're really good at that. I really do. So much opportunity, but the word uncertainty has come up a few times in our conversation. And yes, I agree with you. It's the level of uncertainty that we've had for the last few years I think that not just a kind of pandemic aside, which is obviously we can't put it to one side because it's there and it's had a huge, massive impact on the industry, on ridership, etc. But I think going back to 2018, when everything in terms of the franchising process was brought to a halt and Keith Williams started his review, it's kind of right, okay, what's going to happen? And there's an excitement around that. And there's a momentum around that. But then because the review wasn't released when it was due, and then we had COVID, and then there was that delay, and then we get it, and then there's more, it's kind of like, oh, we just need to get on with it. And we keep kind of, the momentum builds and then it tails off and then it builds. And there's this kind of same process. So I'm with you. I'd like some level of certainty, which perhaps then comes from that absolute clarity of vision. What we're here for, what are we here for? What do we need to deliver? And not necessarily go into the detail of the how. We just need the vision, don't we, of what we're going to be and what we stand for. I love those. I love those 3 wishes. Thank you for sharing them with us. I'm going to bring our conversation to a close with a final question for you, Jonny, and that is, where do you get your inspiration from?
So you did give me forewarning about this one, and it's the question I struggle with the most. So throughout my life and my career, I take inspiration from so many different people: family, friends, colleagues, people I read about, people I see on the telly. So I've picked out 2 historic figures that I quite like. I enjoy reading about and learning about, and then a set of words that came from a training course I went on at Loughborough University a number of years ago. So the 2 historical figures that I take massive inspiration from are Abraham Lincoln, Nelson Mandela.
Wow.
Huge, iconic figures who changed the world. The specific bits, I could talk about them for hours, but the specific bits is the leadership that they displayed in the face of massive adversity, and the humility with which they led with, the fact that they weren't perfect, they had human frailties, they didn't have all the answers, but they created space for other people. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, and then not only forgive his persecutors, but to work alongside them to build a better country. It gives me goosebumps just mentioning his name. An absolutely great man who did great things. But when you read about his story, he was just a person, and he always said, "I'm just a person," and he makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And Abraham Lincoln was self-educated and went on to lead his country probably during its most difficult ever period. But the one snippet, very humble person again, everyone who stood against him to be the president of the United States of America ended up in his cabinet. He brought his enemies, they didn't like him, to work around him because he recognized the talents that they had would make his country better, and the humility to be able to do that. So they're 2 historical figures that I always go to and draw inspiration of. My life is never going to be as difficult as them. I'm never going to have such a grand purpose. But for me, it is taking little things from lots of different people and applying them in a practical way to what you do. And there's some really good books about both of those people if people wanted to read about them. And then I've been on lots of training courses. I'm a little bit rogue on occasion. I don't always enjoy sitting in a classroom. I'm quite practical. There's lots of things where I've sat for days and it's gone in one ear and out the other. But for some reason, this set of words, it was about elite performance and how you could apply it to creating high-performing teams in the workplace. And it's called champion behaviours. So I substitute champion behaviours for high-performing team or high-performing individual.
Yeah.
And it's just a series of bullet points on a slide, and I have them pinned up at home at the desk where I work. And it's called champion behaviours. Champions behave like champions before they're champions. So it's saying that to be good at what you do, you've got to behave in a certain way, but you do that before you ever reach where you're aiming to get to. So if you want to become a director or a manager, or you want to become a train driver, or you want to be the lead a search company and be the best search company, there's things you have to do before you get to where you currently are. Champion behaviours are contagious, so high-performing individuals and the behaviours that they demonstrate rub off on other people. And that is something that I have really seen come to life at West Midlands Trains. When you start the ball rolling and you put people in who display those behaviours day in, day out, encourages other people, it makes them braver. It weeds out the negative behaviours. So that really resonates, that particular one. Champions behave like champions when no one is looking. So it isn't a case of just doing a podcast or turning it on in a meeting or standing up in front of an audience. It's about doing those things day in, day out, and they've got to be habits. And that's something that I try to practice. I'm not perfect. There's things I fail in, but it isn't about just turning it when someone's watching. Champion behaviours must be recognised. So if people are doing the right things, you must call it out, because otherwise they can lapse. It's really easy. And on the same side, you've got to call out non-champion behaviours. So there's no point having artificial harmony. You've got to have honest conflict to get to the best results. And I can't tell you why those sets of words are stuck with me, but it's the only thing that's stuck up on my wall behind my computer. So if people ever have a meeting with me and I'm at home, it's always there. It's
right there. Yeah. I completely agree with all of that. I think quite often, I've been in situations in my career where that for the first point you were making about, act like a champion before you're a champion. For me, my phrase is act as if. So it's kind of, I'm not feeling very confident today. Well, act as if you are. So I'm not feeling like I can go into this. I chaired a Women in Rail event last night, and the nerves before I was going into this situation, talking to some really significant leaders from our industry about the major programs of work that they're leading, Transpennine Route Upgrade and Crew. And I'm like, who am I to talk to these people about what they're doing? They're doing amazing, incredibly massive jobs. And it's kind of, but act as if you were. So there's this kind of, do it, and then you will do it. The behaviours will be there. Completely agree that it's contagious when you're working to your set of standards and behaviours that are acceptable to you, that rubs off on other people. And from an outside perspective, an observer's perspective, I've definitely seen that at West Mids over the last few years, most definitely. To the point where I had a conversation with Jo McPhail a few weeks ago, and I was saying to her, it's like a different organisation. The culture, the environment feels so different, even kind of coming into the office, it feels different. And yes, when no one is looking, there's lots of stuff that gets done because it's kind of, well, look at me and look at what I'm doing. But if you're consistent with your behaviours, then that really starts to demonstrate, I think, that is me. That's me authentically. I'm not trying hard. This is just how I behave and how I am. Thank you for sharing. That's right. It's really, really important.
And the reason I picked out Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela with their humility and the way they went about their business and the champion behaviours is because, to me, those two things combined are huge. And you just used the word authentic. I have got better at what I do when I've been comfortable being my authentic self at work. Yes. And you get advice right the way through your career. And if you want to lead people, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to be the big I am. I've been told to take little snippets of experience and blow them up and polish them beyond all recognition, but I've never been comfortable with that. So actually knowing that there's people who are very comfortable being themselves, being humble, being down to earth, but then displaying the right behaviours, and you can get results. And Westminster Trains is the proof. And one of those champion behaviours Jo often talks about, Jo McPhail, is the recognition. You've got to call out the behaviours, and it's so true, because that sustainability is what we're trying to achieve. And if you keep telling people when they're doing the right things, they'll keep doing them. You challenge the negative behaviours. We're never going to get to perfection, but it gives you the best shot at sustainable success.
Absolutely. And I definitely think that if you make it a habit, and the way that you lead is to recognise and call out the good behaviours, it gives you a much stronger starting point and much more of a much more right, if you want, credibility to call it out when it's not right. So I'm not just telling you when you're getting it wrong. I've told you 10 times that you were getting it right. This time, maybe, might want to do it differently next time. Let's talk about it. Let's call it out. And I think that's the only way we're going to get the level of change across the industry that we need to see, is that ability to say, that's not right. And I'm kind of, my head's going towards the diversity and inclusion piece, where we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. But what you've said around Lincoln and Mandela is really resonating with some conversations that happened at this event I was at last night. We had 8 people, we had 2 separate panels, 8 people in total, talking about these 2 major programs. And what it came down to was not about the engineering side of it, although that's really important. It literally, every conversation, every question that was asked, everything that came from the audience comes back to people and how you lead them. And the leadership part is not, I'm going to tell you what to do. It's having the humility to say, I don't know everything. I can't do everything. I've got an amazing team of people around me and they do what needs to be done. And I'm there in that leadership position to listen, to support, to guide, to all this other stuff. And that's what, you know, when you're talking about Abraham Lincoln and Nelson Mandela, that's where my head's going. That humility to say, do you know what? It's not about me. It's about you guys. You're doing it. You're doing the work.
You create a space for other people to operate effectively. You need to give them an environment in which they're comfortable and be comfortable to challenge people on stuff, even if you're not the expert.
Yes.
But your role is to get the best out of the people around you who do know, who are the experts in their field. So yeah, that is the art of leadership, and I think it is an art, not a science.
I agree completely. Jonny, we know from past experience that I could talk to you for hours, but we're going to bring the conversation to a close. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you again so much for making the time and for agreeing to join me as a guest. I know already that our audience are going to really enjoy this conversation, and let's hope that those 3 wishes that you've highlighted during our conversation today start to gain some traction. I'm certainly doing my bit, and I know you are as well. So thank you. Huge thanks. Jonny Wiseman, Customer Experience Director at West Midlands Trains. My huge thanks to Jonny. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. I found it so interesting, so inspiring and so insightful as well in terms of his views on leadership, amongst many other things. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do join us again for the next episode of Intuitive Insights.